Hello, this is Susan Smith Nash, and I'm here to talk to you today about audience analysis. So, before you even sit down to write or start brainstorming or collecting data, think about the rhetorical situation, as Lloyd Bitzer would put it. What is it exactly that you want to accomplish with your writing? And this is the key part. Who is it who will be listening to your writing or your presentation or whatever discourse it is that you're generating? So we'll speak about writing specifically today. So before you write, during the writing and revision process, the key to an effective presentation or paper or any kind of discursive sharing is understanding your audience. So let's think about who is your audience. Who specifically are your audience members? They could be all kinds of people and they could have different thoughts. So this is something I sketched from Siegfried and Roy years ago about why did the tiger suddenly attack? And then there was a story about a woman who was attacked by a tiger, in theory because she had a wild hairstyle or a haircut. Anyway, I was kind of intrigued. I thought maybe it had to do with some kind of affinity, but you never know. So the key is to think about who your audience will be, who you want your audience to be, what their values are, and think about this too. You're going to have a primary audience that will be their very first people who write or read your writing. But then there's also going to be a secondary audience. So what are those secondary audiences likely to be? And they could be years away. So let's think, how do we think about an audience? Do we think of our audience as the big puffer fish that could kill you if you eat it? Are you actually afraid of your audience? If you are, take heart. You're not alone. Most people are. But once you know your audience, you can feel much more comfortable because they won't just attack out of nowhere, and they won't have just basically what appear to be random, spiteful remarks. At least your remarks, even if they are angry, you'll know why, because you'll understand what you did in your delivery, in your content, in your use of graphics, everything. You'll have an idea of why people reacted the way they did because you'll understand the basics of your audience. So the demographics help. What is the profession, income level, education, gender, race, ethnicity, family, where do they live, what kind of demographics are there in the community at large? Those matter tremendously. So your audience and topic will influence the questions you ask yourself as you try to obtain an accurate idea of the dominant characteristics of your audience, and also as you shape your presentation, you shape your argument. Because, for example, one kind of evidence that's credible to one audience will not be so credible to another. So your statistics may ring true to one audience, type of audience, but they may seem like fake news or manipulation to another. How are you going to communicate your message? Where do you expect your audience to read your message? Social media? In a paper they've downloaded? Is it video? Will they watch it? Will it be a video they download on YouTube, or will it be a more formal movie? The medium of the message has a definite impact on audience impact. If your message is sent via social media, you need to keep in mind the larger group as well. What sector of social media, what are the groups that this is in Twitter, okay. What are the hashtags? Who are the people who are going to be seeing it? If your message includes graphics, how do they appear? Color, black and white, realistic, not realistic? If the medium is video, what are the production values? Is it just completely spontaneous? Is it like something that you captured on the scene, kind of like a YouTube video that you uploaded directly from your camera or from your phone? Or is it something else? Does it have really high production values, including music, set design, or is the mise en scène, direction, camera angles, dolly work, anything. So all of those elements are non-narrative, and they have an impact on your audience because each element carries with it the potential for influencing meaning. The mind makes meaning from each of the elements, graphics, the music, the dialogue, the sequence, and, like it or not, each element will impact the spoken or written part of your discourse. Core values. So, here's this is something I sketched when my son was in the Marines. I said, my old moose mom, says, welcome home, son, and presents him with a home-cooked dinner. Broccoli surprise. My son hated broccoli. So anyway, understanding the core values of your audience really matters. And, okay, clearly you'll never know all of them, but if you understand a bit about the religious, ethnic group, or demographic background of your audience, you may have a fairly good idea about how the audience members respond to certain issues. And we can all think of extreme examples, say certain religious groups we understand. So, for example, let's think about in Mexico, the Mormons who are living in a group. They first moved there in response to restrictions to polygamy in the United States, so they relocated to Mexico. Now, are their values the same or different than those of their Catholic neighbors? Well, yes and no. Same and different. So knowing that will influence how you shape your message. What do you believe is the appropriate role of the government, the state? Is the human being inherently good, bad, or neutral? Are you a Hobbesian adherent and you believe, as in Leviathan, that the monarch should be all-powerful? Do you like Machiavelli's The Prince? Or are you more of a French philosophe, or like Rousseau, believing that people are essentially good? Is the human psyche malleable, rigidly programmed? Can you trust the mind? The key is to identify the core values that pertain to your primary thesis and topics in your paper, and then think about their beliefs, basically about self and society. If your message aligns with your audience's core values and beliefs, you will have more credibility, and your audience will be more likely to pay attention and not just dismiss you out of hand. Shifting attitudes. When and how do the attitudes of your audience shift? This is key because your audience, if you can help them through situational manipulation or managing of your presentation, get them in the right situation or connect to their own situation, either past or present, then you have a chance to influence your audience and motivate them to action. This has a lot to do with speech action theory and Austin's How to Do Things with Words, which has been kind of overlooked in the last decade or so, but it's definitely worth revisiting. So, how to convert ideas, thoughts, words into actual agency and the individual feeling empowered to do something, and that it's of their own volition, even when they've been deeply persuaded. When the attitudes of your audience begin to shift due to a changing situation or even a different speaker, then you have an opportunity to create a more effective argument as well. And this one could work. Why will your audience read? Why will your audience read your document? What's in it for them? In constructing your paper, you need to keep in mind that your audience is not likely to read past the first line unless they are interested, there's something intrinsically motivating and intriguing to them, they're curious, or there's a benefit, or there's some utility or practical action that they, or practical benefit that they will get if they continue to read. So with that in mind, you need to structure your paper so that you positively program or condition your audience by making the paper readable, relevant, reliable, and rewarding. It sounds a lot like Skinner's operant conditioning, doesn't it? Well, probably. Audience expectations. So we talked about this earlier, but what are the expectations? You can set those up so clearly by shaping your narrative, your discourse, so that it may align with, say, archetypal narratives, or it's a type of mode that they automatically recognize, like compare, contrast, or if it's a story, then what type of story? Cinderella story, the great hero, revenge tale, revenge fantasy. If it's a report, it's a sales pitch, an expose, a recommendation. And think of the genre. Is this an academic paper that is purporting to present truth that's reliable and actionable, with actionable knowledge? Or are you trying to take a position, and even if it's a little bit outlandish, propose a scenario or an explanation for a phenomenon? Well, okay, if you're doing that and you're trying to persuade through emotions, you would hardly expect it to read like an instruction manual. So think about how your audience will start to classify your paper as a certain type of paper, a certain type of argument immediately, and then keep that in mind because they will have those expectations as the paper unfolds. Audience preconceptions, very similar. Preconceptions, expectations, but what is the halo effect about the major players in your topic? Is your audience going to have preconceptions about the people, the ideas in your paper? Are you going to talk about, quote, intelligent design or creationism or evolution? There are very definite, fixed, and preconceived ideas about those, and they may be difficult to change. So think about what your audience considers as credible evidence. Statistics, case studies, images, graphics, photographic evidence, photoshopped evidence. Oh, we live in a time of so much manipulation. Your identity, otherness. Who do you consider yourself to be? Do you consider yourself to be this incredible chef, walking around every day with a tattered copy of Le Guide Culinaire by the Escoffier, école, escoffier, or for cuisine, cooking school? Or do you consider yourself to be victimized by your own kitchen? How you consider yourself really matters in how you decide to create an argument. I mean, who are you? And what are like the power hierarchies in your world? Who is the authority? Are you an authority? If you're not, then do you need to refer to authorities? Then also think about your audience and consider how they can look at you. How do they view you? What is your tone, your voice, your ethos? That's your identity. And how is the other, the kind of the, well, I'm thinking Lacanian terms, but the sort of disengaged part of society that is often created as this kind of scary other, and they are important when you're thinking about your audience, because that is essentially an entire area of potential negative response. So, how do you perceive yourself? Who are the, quote, others that you don't really know how they are relating to you in your discourse? Or if you consider yourself an outsider, the, quote, others in society are quintessential outsiders, how does that affect your impact on your audience and how your audience would view you or the argument itself? And if your argument is an outsider argument or kind of like outside the mainstream, that's important to understand too. And, make no mistake, if you get it wrong, the consequences are pretty intense. You can be completely considered uncredible to the point of being ignored, even say, well, depending on well, excuse a little bit of interruption, but that was probably good, because what I want to jump to is just the idea that if you can think of yourself or the audience either as the other, the outsiders, or the insiders, however you think about it, then what you're doing is what Kenneth Burt called consubstantiality, or sort of deep identification, the ability to get under the skin of your audience. So, well, let's go back to this one back. And I just want to say thank you for going through this presentation with me, and let's just kind of flip through the different ideas that we went through. I want to go back to this one. I drew this when I was thinking about genetically engineered chickens and genetically engineered anything. And I thought, when we're talking about identity, sometimes probably people feel like they're a stranger from a strange land. But how would a genetically engineered chicken feel? And how would you like to be that chicken that was engineered to like glow in the dark and have all different kinds of colors and things? And then you find yourself programmed genetically to certain behaviors that you don't even like understand in yourself. Well, I know this sounds kind of strange, but sometimes we have that same kind of relationship with ourselves or with our audience. And the key is to like say, okay, embrace difference, embrace identity, and just have a sense of humor and to essentially think about the joy of communication. Anyway, this is Susan Smith Nash, and I've been your guide for audience analysis.